Welcome to Research Talk. We are in the process of learning grounded theory. So today's video, I'm going to talk about the overall process of data analysis in grounded theory. In grounded theory study, the process of data collection and data analysis, they are not separate. They are together. So you start with your data collection, you collect some data, and then you pause, you transcribe, you look at the data, you do your initial data analysis, and then you go for further data analysis. So the process is very, very iterative in nature. Remember, as a grounded theorist, you are like an investigator. You are like a detective. What a detective does, when a case comes before a detective, they start from one place, some solid leads, and then they go from other leads and they try to investigate all those leads to come to a solution of the case. Similarly, like a detective, as a grounded theorist, you start your data collection, you collect some data, and then based on the data, you do your initial analysis. Based on what is emerging from the data, you do further data collection and further analysis. So the process of data collection and data analysis overall is very iterative in nature. So let's understand this in steps. So in step one, let's say you got your IRB approval done, and now you're ready for data collection. You have some participants who have signed the consent form. Now they are ready to be, let's say, interviewed as part of the data collection. So in step one, you conduct, let's say, 2 to 3, 4 interviews. As you are doing the interviews, you are also familiarizing yourself with the data because you are conducting the conversation. You are exposed to the participant stories and experiences related to what you are investigating. And then, as you transcribe the interviews, again, you are re-exposing yourself to the data. Also, these days, we record our interviews, so you can listen to the interviews as another way to immerse yourself in the data, to familiarize yourself with the data. So in step one, what you do initial interviews, let's say 2, 3, 4, 5 interviews. You transcribe it, and then you do an initial analysis. Initial analysis is done through a method of what we call it process coding. I will add a video on how process coding looks like. How do you do process coding? So you will learn about it. Right now, just understand that you are engaged in the method of process coding. Now, after process coding are done, you can again begin your data collection. And let's say you do additional 4 or 5 interviews. And then the same process, you familiarizing with yourself with the interviews, and then doing your initial coding, which is engaged in process coding. Now, at this stage, when you have almost 10 participants interviews done, you are at a stage now you can go ahead and do your further analysis, which is you can do the next cycle of coding, which is focused coding. As you do your focused coding, you can see some categories and subcategories emerging from the data. As categories and subcategories emerges, you can see the initial tentative findings, initial tentative framework, initial tentative theory emerging from the data. And as your initial tentative theory is emerging from the data, you start with part 2. What is part 2? Part 2 is about developing those initial tentative frameworks, theories even further. So in the initial part of your data collection and data analysis, you can see that some categories are more developed than other categories. And as a grounded theorist, you want to make sure that all your categories, subcategories are developed fully. And to do that, we call this process part 2, where you start with theoretical sampling. A theoretical sampling refers to the process of sampling where you are recruiting and talking to people to develop the categories and subcategories which are not fully developed. So let's say I have a category which is does not very descriptive, does not have all like a good rich detail and data around that. So in my next interviews, I can focus on those components, those experiences to help developing those categories and subcategories which are not developed, developing the part of the theory, a component of a theory or the process of a theory which is not fully developed. And we call this process theoretical sampling, a sampling which is done to develop and refine your theory. And once you are done with theoretical sampling, you start with theoretical coding and further refinement of the theory. So in part 2, you start again talking to participant. This time, when you are interviewing, along with asking all the questions which were already there in your interview protocol, you are focusing more on the component, the categories, subcategories which are not fully developed. Now, when you get those data, you again engaged in the same process, which is engaged in process coding and focused coding and axial coding. All these three, I have created videos, I'll put it there, which explain these different process ways of coding the data. But right now, let's focus on the overall process. So when you are engaged in these codings, it will lead to further development of your theory. So as you are doing more participant interviews, doing these analysis and refining your categories and subcategories, you reach a point which is called theoretical saturation. Theoretical saturation. And remember, theoretical saturation is different from data saturation. So let's understand what these two terms means and why we use theoretical saturation in grounded theory. In other qualitative traditions, the focus is on data saturation. What it means, as a researcher, when you are collecting the data, analyzing the data, you reach a point where the new interviews or new means of data that you are collecting are not adding anything to the themes or the data which is already there. So you are getting more sort of a repetitive, same kind of data. So you tell yourself that you are reaching a point of data saturation. In grounded theory, the focus is on developing a theory, a process map, a theoretical framework. So we do not use the concept of data saturation, we use the concept of theoretical saturation. It means that as a grounded theorist, as I am doing my analysis and interviews and further analysis, I am reaching a stage where my theory, all the categories and subcategories are fully developed. The new interviews I am doing is not adding anything to the theory which is already kind of developed, fully developed. And this point, we call it theoretical saturation. So theoretical saturation is what a grounded theorist is aspire to achieve. And when you reach that stage, let's say you have done 25th interviews, and then by this time you feel that your categories, subcategories, your theory is completely developed and nothing is added to the theory onwards. So you stop collecting more data and you can claim that you have reached a point of theoretical saturation. So this is how the process of data collection and data analysis looks like. Let's summarize it. In grounded theory, the process of data collection and data analysis, they went together. They are like in a very cyclic process. Data collection and data analysis, they are very cyclic in nature. So you do it together. You start with part one, where you collect some data, analyze your data, and then come up with the tentative categories, subcategories, a tentative theory. And then you do further data collection, you do theoretical sampling, and those data are done to further refine your theories or categories, subcategories. And then you keep doing that until you reach the stage of theoretical saturation where you stop collecting more data. And that's when your theory sort of fully developed at that stage. So that's how the overall process of data collection looks like in grounded theory. I hope it clarifies overall how it looks like. In the further videos, I'm going to talk about these coding process. So we'll start with process coding, and then we'll go to focused coding and axial coding. These are the three strategies used in grounded theory in the process of data analysis. Have a good day, and I'll see you soon.